What if I told you that everything you've been told about death was only designed to comfort you, not to prepare you? From the moment you were old enough to understand the word death, you were fed a soft version of it. You were told that it's peaceful, that it's the end of pain, that when you close your eyes for the last time, you'll be greeted by light, warmth, and those you've lost. And maybe that's true, for some. But what if that's only half the truth? What if the afterlife isn't a universal sanctuary, but a continuation of everything you refused to face while you were alive? What if death isn't the escape, but the unveiling? You see, most people live as though death will forgive everything, as though the moment you pass from this world, all your burdens, regrets, anger, and fear will dissolve into cosmic light. That somehow the afterlife is indifferent to the life you lived. But deep down, some part of you suspects that this is wishful thinking. You've sensed it in your dreams, in those quiet moments at night when the world goes still, in the way you feel when you're surrounded by people yet feel completely alone. There's a whisper beneath all the noise that says, it doesn't end the way they told you. And that whisper isn't wrong. Death is not an eraser. It doesn't wipe the slate clean. Instead, it reveals the slate in perfect clarity. It shows you what was written on your soul, not what you showed the world. It doesn't care about your resume, your titles, your possessions. It reveals who you became through your choices, your thoughts, your intentions. Not in a judgmental way, but in a deeply reflective one. You step into a realm where nothing can be hidden, where everything you buried is now fully exposed. Think of it like this. Your inner world, the one you constantly ignore or silence with distractions, becomes your outer world after death. The bitterness you never resolved, the guilt you carried but refused to confront, the love you withheld out of fear, these energies do not vanish when your body does. Instead, they echo, intensify, and form the very environment your soul awakens into. You don't escape your life, you relive it, but from the inside out. This is the illusion most are trapped in, the illusion of safe passage. The idea that death is some kind of cosmic anesthesia, that it lulls you into eternal rest, no matter how you lived. But the truth is, death doesn't transform you, it reveals you. It uncovers the architecture of your inner being, built slowly across a lifetime, brick by brick, with every thought, word, and deed. And for many, that revelation isn't peaceful, it's disorienting, even terrifying. Imagine spending your whole life avoiding your pain, only to find that it's all that remains when everything else is stripped away. Imagine clinging to material desires, only to arrive in a realm where those desires have no form, no outlet, and no satisfaction. Imagine living your life wearing masks, and suddenly waking up in a world where masks cannot exist. The illusion of safe passage comforts the ego, but the soul knows better. The soul knows that transition isn't guaranteed to be gentle, not because some external force is punishing you, but because truth always has a way of burning through illusion. And when your soul is immersed in truth, truth without the veil of flesh and time and social expectation, it can be a difficult awakening. You might be wondering, is this meant to scare you? No, it's meant to awaken you, to remind you that the way you live now shapes the way you'll transition later. The afterlife isn't a destination handed to you, it's a reflection of you. And if you've spent your life avoiding yourself, death can become a confrontation instead of a homecoming. But here's the other side of the truth, the empowering side. If death reveals who you are, then life is your opportunity to shape that being. Every act of kindness, every moment of stillness, every effort to forgive, to let go, to rise above the lower impulses, that's the real preparation. That's the real passport. Because what you cultivate within yourself doesn't disappear. It travels with you. The good news is, you're not powerless. You were never at the mercy of random fate. You are a creator. And just as you've created the patterns of your life, you are right now creating the momentum that will carry you into whatever comes next. You get to decide, here and now, whether your soul will arrive in that other realm prepared or panicked, peaceful or lost, radiant or shrouded. Most people don't think about this until it's too late. They move through life as if the afterlife is some pre-written story waiting for them, as if all roads lead to peace no matter how much chaos they carried. But just as not everyone finds peace in life, not everyone finds peace after life. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows you everything, and it shows you only what you've given it to reflect. This isn't a punishment, it's the highest form of spiritual integrity. It means the universe honors who you truly are, not who you pretended to be. And if there's any fear in that idea, it's only because some part of you knows you haven't fully shown up yet, not in your truth, not in your heart, not in your soul's full presence. But you still can. Let go of the illusion that death will fix what you're unwilling to face. Let go of the idea that you can live unconscious and still arrive in a conscious realm, that you can live in fear and somehow pass into love. The two are not vibrationally compatible. Energy doesn't lie. It carries a signature, a tone, and you are crafting that tone every single day, through your choices, your emotions, your beliefs. The illusion of safe passage is seductive because it asks nothing of you. But the truth asks everything. It asks you to wake up, to become aware, to become accountable for the energy you hold, the wounds you carry, the love you offer or withhold. It asks you to stop waiting for death, to deliver you, and to start delivering yourself, into healing, into clarity, into alignment. Because when that moment comes, and it will, it won't be about whether you believed in heaven or reincarnation or any particular doctrine. It will be about vibration, resonance, truth, the truth you've built within, the peace you've cultivated, the presence you've practiced. And in that space between your last breath and the next reality, there will be no hiding. There will only be what you've become. That's not meant to frighten you, it's meant to liberate you. Because once you know that death reveals, not erases, you stop postponing your awakening. You realize the only safe passage is to live in truth now. What if everything you've been taught about the afterlife was based on the assumption that all souls automatically move forward? That no matter who you were, what you did, or how you lived, you'd be carried into the light simply because your body stopped breathing? It's comforting to think so, isn't it? That death is a finish line, and crossing it is the only requirement to enter peace. But what if that belief is not only false? What if it's dangerous? The truth is far more layered, far more sobering, and far more empowering, if you're willing to see it. There is an ancient understanding, echoed across cultures, and whispered through sacred texts, that the journey of the soul after death is anything but automatic. There is no divine escalator carrying every soul upward, regardless of its state. In fact, many souls don't ascend at all. Some become stuck, others drift, and some, tragically, regress. Not because they're punished, but because they are not prepared. They have not cultivated the inner strength, clarity, or frequency required to navigate the realms beyond this one. You were born into a reality that trained you to prepare for everything except the one transition that awaits us all. You learned how to make money, how to survive heartbreak, how to build a career. But no one taught you how to die. No one taught you what your soul would need when the physical shell is stripped away. You were led to believe that death is a single doorway, and beyond it lies a singular destination. But the soul does not pass into a uniform afterlife. It enters the frequency it has built. And the afterlife is not one realm, it is many. Some souls, when they leave the body, rise with a gentle and almost immediate pull toward the light. They are met by familiar energies, guides, loved ones, angelic presences, because their own energy was already aligned with those higher frequencies. Their transition feels natural, almost like waking up from a dream into something that was always more real than life itself. But for others, the moment of death is not release, it is confusion, fragmentation, a drifting into realms shaped by inner distortion. Imagine for a moment a person who spent their life clinging to power, resentment, or greed. They never learned stillness. They never touched the truth of who they were beyond their achievements or fears. Now imagine that person crossing the threshold, only to find themselves in a realm where none of their earthly attachments hold weight, where their identity begins to dissolve, but they have nothing of depth to anchor them. That soul does not move forward. That soul becomes disoriented, maybe even afraid. They do not recognize the light, not because the light isn't present, but because their inner world never made room for it. Some of these souls become what you might think of as lost. But they are not lost in the way you might picture in stories or movies. They are lost in the sense that they remain suspended in an energetic space, neither fully here nor fully there, trapped by their own confusion, their own vibrational residue. These souls often dwell in what many traditions have called the lower astral realms, places of fog, places where the landscape is shaped not by divine design, but by personal illusion. They see what they expect to see, fear what they feared in life, relive emotional loops without realizing they've left their body behind. There are souls who don't even realize they've died. They continue walking through familiar environments, reliving moments, revisiting places, playing out conversations they never resolved. These souls are not evil, they are unprepared, and in some ways, they are suffering, because without awareness, there can be no transformation. Without awareness, the soul cannot rise. Others are not confused, but heavy. They feel the weight of what they did not heal in life, not as punishment, but as reality. When you pass from the body, the distraction of the physical world is stripped away. What you ignored in life becomes the foreground. Your regrets, your guilt, your betrayals. They echo, louder and longer, because there is no more calendar, no more clock, no more drug, relationship, or television to drown them out. The soul carries everything it did not resolve. And some souls, unable to release these burdens, begin to regress, not in some mythological sense of being sent backward, but in a spiritual sense. They contract, their light dims, their energy closes in on itself. But here is what makes this all so profound. Every soul arrives into the afterlife exactly where its vibration allows. No realm is imposed. The soul is not judged. It simply magnetizes to the level it resonates with. The afterlife is infinite, not because there are infinite destinations, but because there are infinite states of consciousness, and each one shapes the world the soul steps into. This is why ancient initiates prepared for death their entire lives. They didn't fear it, they respected it. They understood that death was not the end, but the great unveiling. They trained the soul to navigate the invisible worlds, to recognize truth beyond illusion, and to maintain clarity when the old anchors of physicality were removed. Because without preparation, the soul often clings to identity, to fear, to memory, to addiction. And clinging pulls the soul downward, not upward. The modern world has dismissed these truths, preferring to paint a single afterlife in pastel colors, pearly gates, endless meadows, loved ones waiting in white robes. And yes, for some, it may appear that way, because that is what they have cultivated within themselves. But for others, death reveals the energetic chaos they refuse to resolve. It unveils a self they never made peace with. And yet, none of this is hopeless. In fact, it is the opposite. It means you are not at the mercy of fate. You are not a passenger being delivered to some predestined location. You are the architect of your next dimension. Every time you choose forgiveness, you are clearing the energy that could otherwise trap you. Every time you turn inward to reflect instead of project, you are increasing your soul's buoyancy. Every moment of stillness, every breath of surrender, every act of love, these are not small gestures. They are spiritual muscles being trained for the greatest journey you'll ever take. So no, the afterlife is not a one-size-fits-all experience. And no, not every soul finds peace the moment they cross. But every soul has the opportunity to begin again. Because while the soul may falter, it is never abandoned. There are guides, energies, and forces on the other side that wait, not with judgment, but with patience. They do not drag you forward, they wait for your vibration to meet them. And until that day, your soul remains in the world it has created, not as punishment, but as consequence, as mirror, as medicine. The question is not what happens when you die. The question is, what are you becoming now? Because your soul is listening, it is watching, it is shaping itself by how you choose to live. And when the moment comes, when your final breath slips from your lips, you will not enter a place chosen for you. You will enter the place you have been choosing all along. What if I told you that when you die, you don't enter a new world, you enter yourself? It sounds strange at first, even unsettling. But what if the afterlife isn't a kingdom governed by external forces? What if it isn't a reward for the good or a punishment for the wicked, but something far more intimate? What if it is a mirror a vast and intelligent reflection of your inner world, projected outward across a spiritual landscape, not symbolic, not poetic, literal. What if every fear you've buried, every guilt you've carried, every attachment you've refused to release, doesn't disappear when you die, but forms the walls, the sky, and the atmosphere of the dimension you step into? This isn't some metaphor meant to stir emotions. This is the reality spoken of in sacred teachings across time, a reality where consciousness is the architect, and your vibration, the energy signature you've cultivated over your life, is the blueprint. You don't escape yourself in death, you meet yourself, fully, without filters, without distractions, without the numbing comforts of a physical body. You face the raw data of your being, and it surrounds you in form. Imagine walking into a realm where every unresolved wound becomes a pattern in the landscape, where your joy becomes the light, where your bitterness becomes the weather, where your memories are no longer stored in your mind, but manifest around you like living echoes. That's what it means to say the afterlife is a mirror. And that's why so many souls become overwhelmed upon arrival, because they expect to be carried into peace, but instead find themselves wrapped in the very emotions they avoided in life. If you lived with chronic fear, that fear doesn't fade with your heartbeat. It expands, it takes shape, it becomes a fog that surrounds you, a distortion in your perception. It becomes the room you can't leave, the hallway that keeps shifting, the presence you can't quite see, but always feel. And it's not because some being is punishing you, it's because fear was your atmosphere all along. You just had the body to distract you from it. Now, there's nothing between you and the truth. If you carried guilt, deep and unresolved, it may appear in the afterlife as a heaviness, not in your body, but in the space around you. You might walk and feel as if your steps sink into the ground. The guilt takes form not as some metaphysical punishment, but as a gravitational force, because guilt, unhealed, weighs down the soul. It closes the energy field. And when you no longer have muscles or breath to distract you, you begin to feel that weight everywhere you go. If you lived consumed by attachment to a person, an identity, an addiction, or a belief, you may find yourself in a loop, the same memory playing over and over, the same craving without satisfaction, the same image, relationship, or longing repeating in endless cycles. You think you're stuck in the afterlife, but in truth, you were already stuck in life. Death only magnified it. This is why so many traditions emphasized inner purification before death. They weren't trying to scare people into obedience. They were trying to prepare the soul to enter its own energy field without distortion. They understood that whatever you don't face in life becomes your companion in death, only louder, brighter, and impossible to ignore. You might think you're going to a place. In reality, you're stepping into a frequency. The soul is not judged like a defendant in a courtroom. It is revealed like a photograph coming into focus. Every choice you made leaves an imprint. Every unresolved trauma carries a tone. And when you leave the body behind, those tones blend together into a vibrational field that surrounds you. That field becomes your afterlife. And because the universe is not a system of arbitrary rewards and punishments, but a mirror of consciousness, you are shown exactly what you need to see until you're ready to rise higher. But here's the key. Just as the afterlife is a mirror, it is also dynamic. You're not trapped in your inner world forever. You can change your frequency even there. The mirror doesn't lock you in, it reflects your readiness to move forward. The more you recognize what you're seeing, the more you integrate what you denied, the more the mirror begins to shift, the fog begins to lift, the loop begins to dissolve, and eventually, light begins to enter, because you've become able to receive it. But for many souls, this process doesn't happen automatically. Some remain in these mirror realms for what feels like years, or even lifetimes, not because they're bad, but because they're still entangled in illusions, they're still gripping stories, they're still running from themselves. And until that resistance melts, the mirror continues to reflect. That's why self-honesty is the most powerful spiritual tool you possess. Not rituals, not mantras, not beliefs. Honesty. The kind of honesty that admits your wounds, that faces your shadow without shame, that surrenders the ego's need to be right, righteous, or in control. That kind of honesty begins to loosen the chains that bind the soul, not just in life, but in what comes after. Because in these mirror realms, The laws of spiritual physics are absolute. Like attracts, like. Consciousness creates form, denial creates distortion. And truth sets the soul free, not metaphorically, but quite literally. The more aligned your inner world is with love, clarity, and wholeness, the more radiant the afterlife becomes. It's not a reward, it's a resonance. If you cultivated compassion, you may find yourself in a realm filled with beauty, because compassion raises vibration. If you practiced gratitude, you may enter a space filled with warmth, because gratitude expands perception. If you lived in service, you may meet guides and presences that have been waiting for you, because your energy already aligns with theirs. But if you lived guarded, closed, bitter, or dishonest, those qualities don't condemn you, they simply shape your starting point. They become the terrain you must move through before you can rise. And the beauty is, you always can. No matter where you begin, you are not lost. You are only being shown what you need to heal in order to ascend. That is the mercy of the mirror. It doesn't lie, but it always invites transformation. So ask yourself, if death is a mirror, what is it going to show you? If every unresolved pattern becomes your landscape, what kind of world are you building right now? Are you cultivating a frequency that will carry you into light, or one that will hold you in loops? The time to answer these questions is not after death. It's now. Because every moment you live, you're feeding the mirror. You're placing pieces into a puzzle that you'll eventually step into. And whether that world is one of peace, confusion, beauty, or shadow, depends not on divine judgment, but on your present vibration. The mirror doesn't punish, it simply reflects. The afterlife doesn't decide for you. It reveals what you've decided already. And the moment you see that, your preparation begins, not for an ending, but for the most honest homecoming you'll ever face. What if I told you that what many have mistaken for hell is actually something far more subtle and far more personal? Not a realm of eternal fire, but of cold repetition. Not a place of divine wrath, but of unresolved energy. What if I told you that the scariest parts of the afterlife aren't created by a judging God, but by the echoes of your own consciousness, stretched into a world that reflects everything you couldn't release? There exists a dimension few speak of with clarity, a place whispered about in sacred texts, referenced in dreams, and felt by those who have brushed up against the edge of death. It is not a place of torture, but of stagnation, not of flames, but of fog. It is the realm where souls wander, not because they are condemned, but because they are confused. It is what some call the shadowlands, a vibrational space where the residue of fear, bitterness, and greed clings to the spirit like thick smoke. These are not evil souls. They are souls whose frequency holds them in lower layers of consciousness, unable to move forward. When a soul departs the body, it doesn't suddenly gain clarity just because the heart has stopped. The soul doesn't become enlightened by default. It becomes exposed. And for some, that exposure is disorienting. They awaken in the afterlife with the same attachments, the same addictions, the same fears they had in life, but now, without the structure of the physical body to contain or suppress them. The result is a kind of spiritual inertia, a looping, echo-filled dimension where time doesn't function the way it does here, where a moment of regret can stretch into what feels like centuries, where the echo of a grudge becomes the very air a soul breathes. The shadowlands are not punishments. They are reflections. They are constructed not by some cosmic warden, but by the very energy a soul carried within itself. If you lived your life through the lens of bitterness, always blaming, always resenting, then you may find yourself in a realm shaped by isolation. Not because someone banished you there, but because bitterness isolates. It closes the heart. It narrows the field of perception. And in the spiritual world, perception creates environment. If you lived gripped by greed, always wanting, never satisfied, clinging to status or possessions, or the illusion of control, then you may find yourself in a realm where everything is just out of reach. Where you chase shadows of fulfillment, but never quite touch them. Again, not as a punishment, but as a mirror. Greed is the energy of hunger without nourishment. So that's what the soul experiences, until it learns that nothing external can fill a spiritual void. And if you lived in fear, chronic, unexamined fear, the afterlife can become a fog of endless what-ifs. Fear has a unique way of projecting itself outward. It creates shapes that aren't real, but feel real. It causes the soul to flinch, to shrink, to retreat. In the shadowlands, fear becomes the architecture of your surroundings. Walls appear where there are none. Paths close before you take a step. The soul isn't trapped by walls, but by the belief that the walls exist. These echo realms feel real to those within them. The landscapes are generated by thought, the atmosphere charged with emotion, the sky painted by memory. And because thought and feeling shape reality instantly in the spiritual dimension, these worlds are fluid, yet hauntingly consistent. A soul in these zones may walk the same street endlessly, revisit the same argument, replay the same loss. Not because they are forced to, but because they haven't yet realized that they can choose something different. That realization requires awakening, and awakening requires readiness. You cannot force a soul to rise out of the shadowlands. They must see through the illusion themselves. And that's what makes these realms so tragic. Many souls remain stuck not because they're incapable of leaving, but because they don't know they're dreaming. They don't know they've died. They think they're still in the world of form, only everything feels a little more surreal, a little more dreamlike, a little more haunted. But here's the deeper truth. If the afterlife is created by the soul's energy, then it can also be transformed by it. The moment a soul remembers its true nature, when it drops the fear, forgives itself, or reaches out in love, the landscape begins to shift. Light starts to enter. Guides may appear, not because they weren't there before, but because the soul's vibration finally opened enough to perceive them. The fog doesn't disappear all at once, but it begins to thin. The loop begins to break. The soul begins to ascend, not vertically, but vibrationally. Some, who've returned from near-death experiences, speak of passing through gray zones, of wandering in places that felt hollow or cold, of seeing other spirits that seemed lost, angry, or afraid. They describe these places not with fire and pitchforks, but with emotional weight, a sense of stuckness, a yearning to go somewhere else, but not knowing how. These are glimpses of the shadowlands, realms that exist not far from the earth plane, but just beyond the veil. Realms that some might call purgatory, not because they are cursed, but because they are unresolved. And while it may seem bleak, there is profound grace hidden here, because every soul has the ability to rise. No one is permanently bound to these lower realms. The key lies in recognition, in surrender, in the simple but radical act of choosing a higher frequency. Sometimes that shift happens quickly. Sometimes it takes what feels like lifetimes. But in spiritual reality, time is less important than willingness. You see, the universe is built on freedom. Every soul is free to explore, to create, to experience, even if what it creates is confusion, even if what it experiences is disconnection. But that same freedom is also the path out. Nothing bars you from the higher realms except the weight of what you have not yet released. That's why inner work in life is so vital. The shadowlands are not born in death. They are cultivated in the heart long before the final breath. Every resentment you hold, every fear you refuse to face, every lie you tell yourself, these are bricks in a structure you may one day find yourself walking through. But every act of forgiveness, every moment of courage, every time you choose love over control, that is light added to your path. That is preparation for the soul's true journey. So ask yourself honestly, what are you still carrying that does not serve you? What patterns are you feeding that could follow you into the next world? Because when the body falls away, the only thing left is energy. And the energy you've cultivated becomes the environment you awaken into. The shadowlands are not meant to frighten you. They are meant to wake you. They are not mythical punishments. They are spiritual feedback. And the fact that you can shift them, escape them, rise above them, that is the ultimate message of hope. There is no hell waiting for you. Only mirrors. And some mirrors reflect light, while others, if not cleaned, reflect only the dust of what you refuse to see. But even in the darkest reflection, the light is always waiting, just beyond the veil of your own becoming. What if I told you that not every soul crosses over? It's something most people don't want to consider. We like to believe that the moment the heart stops, the soul is carried away on wings of light, that every person who dies is instantly embraced by peace, clarity, and divine welcome. But the reality, quietly echoed in ancient teachings and whispered by those who have glimpsed the veil, is that not all souls move on. Some remain. Not in paradise, not in punishment, but in a strange in-between, looping in places they once knew, trapped in fragments of memory and emotion. They are not cursed, they are confused. Not judged, but frozen in vibration. These are the lost, the ones caught in the loop. To understand this, you have to first understand what it means to die without dying. The body may shut down, the breath may cease, the physical senses may go silent. But consciousness doesn't always immediately detach, especially when that consciousness is still heavily entangled in what it left behind. For some, death is not a clean departure. It's a disoriented stumble. It's a doorway half opened and half denied. They don't know they've died, or they refuse to believe it. And in that state of spiritual dissonance, they linger. Some remain near the places they lived, homes, hospitals, familiar roads. They wander not like specters from horror movies, but like people searching for something they can't name. A soul may walk the halls of a house long sold to strangers, unable to understand why no one sees them, why no one responds. Another may visit the site of their passing over and over, replaying the final moments of their life like a broken record. They are not haunting others. They are haunted by a memory they haven't been able to release. And then there are those whose emotional trauma was so strong in life, it followed them into death. If someone died in fear, in rage, in sudden violence or overwhelming grief, the energy of that moment can become imprinted on their consciousness like a scar. Instead of transitioning smoothly, their soul becomes wrapped in the echo of that event. They relive it, sometimes unconsciously, for what feels like endless cycles. Not because they're being punished, but because they haven't yet realized that they're free to step beyond it. This is the loop, a spiritual feedback loop where the soul remains entangled in a fragment of the past. A looping scene, a looping feeling, a looping belief. Sometimes the loop is subtle. A mother who died worried for her child may hover near her family, unable to let go. A man who clung to his business identity may find himself working in an ethereal version of his office, still making imaginary phone calls, still writing emails no one receives. Other loops are more intense. A person who felt betrayed may keep replaying confrontations. A soul consumed by revenge might remain energetically tethered to the one they believed wronged them. These loops don't look like punishment. They look like confusion. They feel like habit. The soul is no longer in the body, but its mind is still running the same program. The patterns it clung to in life didn't stop when the body stopped. They followed the soul into the next layer of existence. Because the soul carries its own environment, its own vibration, its own illusions, and until those illusions dissolve, the loop continues. In rare cases, some souls are not just looping in memory, but actively trying to maintain control in the world they left behind. These are the spirits that often become labeled as ghosts. Not demons, not monsters, but souls who are simply too tethered to let go. Their identities were so wrapped up in control, in unfinished business, or in fear of judgment, that they chose to stay where they are rather than face what's next. They try to communicate, influence, or even interfere, not out of evil intent, but out of desperation, attachment, or fear. Sometimes these souls refuse help, not because help isn't available, but because their vibration won't allow them to see or receive it. Beings of light are always reaching out, always guiding. But light can only reach you to the extent that you're open to receiving it. If a soul's field is full of anger, denial, or obsession, the higher realms can seem distant, even invisible. The soul doesn't know it's being offered healing. It only knows that it's stuck, that something feels incomplete, and that the world it once knew is fading in strange and painful ways. But not all lost souls are unaware. Some know they've died, but they don't feel ready to move on. They fear judgment. They believe they haven't done enough. Or they feel so guilty over how they lived that they choose to linger in the shadows, punishing themselves in silence. These are the souls who wait, not because they must, but because they don't believe they deserve peace. Their loop is not just energetic, it's psychological. And until they remember their own worth, they remain in the borderlands of consciousness, neither fully gone nor fully present. So, how do these loops end? How does a soul finally break free? It begins with recognition. The moment a soul becomes aware that it is looping, that it no longer needs to replay the past, it opens a crack in the illusion. That crack can be a moment of surrender, a prayer, a memory of love, a sudden light in the distance, and through that opening, higher guidance can reach in. Beings of higher consciousness, those dedicated to helping lost souls, can extend their presence more powerfully when the soul begins to soften its grip. That's when release becomes possible. Sometimes that release comes through the living, when someone still in the physical world prays, forgives, or communicates with compassion toward a soul who is stuck. It can act like a spiritual catalyst. Not because the living have power over the dead, but because love is a frequency that transcends the veil. That frequency can dissolve shame, break illusions, and call the soul forward into remembrance. But the deeper message here isn't just about ghosts or wandering spirits. It's about you. Because the loop doesn't begin in death, it begins in life. Every time you refuse to forgive, you strengthen a loop. Every time you define yourself by your pain, your anger, or your status, you build an energetic structure that could follow you. Every time you avoid inner healing, you hand the loop more power. That's why living consciously matters. That's why tending to your emotional field, your unresolved stories, and your attachments isn't just about feeling better now. It's about preparing for the moment when your soul is no longer anchored to flesh and time. Because in that moment, the only thing that travels with you is your frequency. And your frequency determines whether you ascend or whether you linger in the echo of what you never let go. The loop is not eternal. No soul is lost forever. But time, in the spiritual realms, doesn't pass like it does here. A loop that feels like hours to one soul might seem like centuries to another. And the longer the loop plays, the deeper the soul forgets what freedom felt like. That's why awareness is liberation. That's why presence is power. You are not just living your life, you are building your next chapter. Every thought, every intention, every emotion becomes the architecture of your soul's momentum. And when your body one day exhales for the final time, you won't be starting from zero. You'll be stepping into the very energy you've been carrying all along. The question is, will that energy set you free, or will it keep you circling something that was never meant to be eternal? The choice, as always, begins now. What if I told you that death doesn't end your story, it carries it forward? There's a belief, deeply embedded in the collective psyche, that death is a kind of final reset. That when your body gives out, everything you've done, everything you've thought, every choice you've made, simply dissolves into the void. That you're given a clean slate, a new page, an erasure of everything that came before. But that belief is a comforting illusion. Because the truth is, karma doesn't sleep. It doesn't pause at the edge of death, waiting politely for your next incarnation. It travels with you, like breath moving through lifetimes, like an echo that refuses to be silenced until it's acknowledged, understood, and transformed. Karma is not punishment, it is not revenge, it's not the universe waiting to strike you down for some moral misstep. Karma is memory, not memory in the brain, but memory in the soul. It's the energetic imprint of your actions, your thoughts, and your intentions, woven into the architecture of your being, and just because you leave the physical body doesn't mean you leave that imprint behind. If anything, the afterlife reveals it more clearly. Stripped of the distractions of flesh, the soul begins to feel its own frequency. And that frequency is karma made visible. Imagine waking up from a dream only to find that your surroundings have been shaped entirely by how you treated others, by what you believed, by the fears you fed, and the love you withheld. Not as punishment, but as continuity. Your soul doesn't stop being responsible for its energy just because it crossed into another realm. Responsibility doesn't expire with your heartbeat. It expands. And the more aware you become, the more clearly you begin to see how every action ripples through dimensions, carving your path forward. You see, karma is not linear, it's vibrational. It doesn't follow you like a list of wrongs scribbled in some cosmic notebook. It moves with you as tone, as frequency, as emotional residue. If you lived your life constantly judging others, that judgment becomes a filter. When you die, you don't suddenly see everything with love and clarity. You see through the very lens you built. You perceive your afterlife through the energy you cultivated. Judgment might color the way you experience other souls. It might block the presence of beings who are trying to help you ascend. It might even manifest as a realm that feels cold, rigid, or isolating. Not because someone placed you there, but because karma follows consciousness. If you manipulated others, lied for gain, or took what wasn't yours, that energy doesn't disappear with your last breath. It embeds itself into your field. And when you pass, you may find yourself in a realm where trust is elusive, where every interaction feels unstable, where you yourself are unsure of what is real. Why? Because the energy you put out has returned, not as a sentence, but as an opportunity to face what you refuse to see in life. Karma doesn't punish, it presents. It brings into your awareness the very vibration you need to evolve beyond. And yes, this includes your intentions, perhaps especially so. The universe reads energy, not appearances. You can perform acts of kindness with a hidden agenda, and what imprints is not the act, but the energy behind it. Likewise, you can stumble and make mistakes, but if your heart is genuinely striving to love, to grow, to heal, then that striving carries immense karmic weight. The afterlife honors the vibration beneath the behavior. It reveals who you are in essence, not in image. This is why the idea that death automatically purifies the soul is a dangerous myth. It creates complacency. It encourages people to delay their healing, to postpone integrity, to assume that the next world will fix what they were unwilling to face in this one. But death doesn't fix you. It frees you to face yourself more honestly. It removes the masks. It amplifies the truth. And that truth includes every ripple you've sent into the lives of others, every word spoken in anger, every betrayal cloaked in silence, every hand withheld when you could have helped. And yet, in all of this, karma remains your ally. It doesn't exist to trap you, it exists to awaken you. It's a cosmic compass, always pointing you back toward balance. It reveals the unfinished lessons, the unresolved emotions, the energy still waiting to be harmonized. And it follows you, not because it's trying to burden you, but because your soul has already chosen to learn. Karma is not imposed. It is accepted, long before birth, long before memory. It is the soul saying, I want to grow, I want to love more fully, and I am willing to face what I have created, so I can become who I truly am. When you enter the afterlife, you may find yourself greeted not just by light or angels, but by moments. Moments from your life replayed not like a slideshow, but as living experiences. You feel what others felt. You witness the ripple effects of your actions in ways your mind could never have comprehended. If you caused someone pain, you may feel that pain, not to be punished, but to understand. If you brought someone joy, you may feel that joy amplified, echoing through the realms. This is karmic reflection. It is intimate, it is precise, and it is one of the most powerful awakenings the soul can undergo. But the real power is in what happens next. Because karma isn't just about review, it's about response. Once you see your patterns, you are given the chance to choose again. Some souls move forward with clarity and peace. Others choose to return to earth, not because they are forced, but because they know there is more to complete, more to heal, more to give. Reincarnation is not karmic punishment, it is karmic opportunity, a chance to return, to try again, to bring light where there was once shadow. And so, your karma becomes your curriculum, not written by fate, but authored by your soul. Each lesson designed to help you remember who you really are beneath the fear, beneath the ego, beneath the illusion of separation. Karma isn't the chains of your past, it is the key to your liberation, if you're willing to use it. The idea that you can outrun your karma by dying is one of the greatest spiritual misunderstandings of all time. You cannot escape your energy, you are made of it. Death doesn't erase karma, it reveals it. What you don't resolve here, you'll carry there. What you avoid now, you'll face later. But here's the most important truth of all. Karma is always offering you the chance to evolve, always. Even in the afterlife, even in the next incarnation, even in the darkest mirror, there is always a way forward. So the question is not whether you have karma. You do, we all do. The real question is, what are you doing with it? Are you ignoring it, hoping time or theology will wash it clean? Or are you working with it, owning it, transforming it into light? Because every thought you think, every word you speak, every intention you carry, is shaping not only your life, but your soul's momentum. And when you one day cross into that next realm, you will not arrive empty-handed. You will carry with you the invisible architecture you've been building with every breath. And that architecture will become the world you step into. Karma doesn't sleep, but neither does grace. And the more consciously you live now, the more beautifully your soul will rise later. What if I told you that death is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of your initiation? So many people live as if the ultimate test is surviving this world, enduring hardship, collecting achievements, proving worth through struggle or status. We've been taught that life is the battlefield, and death the reward, a final sleep, a gentle light, an eternal rest. But what if that's just the prologue? What if the real trials, the real tests of the soul, begin the moment you leave the body? Not as punishment, not as some mythic judgment day, but as sacred initiation into the next stage of consciousness. Across the world's oldest traditions, there exists a powerful thread of knowledge, quietly preserved and passed down through esoteric texts, oral stories, and shamanic visions. That knowledge tells us death is not a release from growth, but the beginning of a higher form of it. And those who cross over without preparing for this next phase often find themselves lost, confused, or unready, not because they were bad, but because they didn't know that life was only the first classroom. Think of death not as a wall you hit, but a threshold you cross. And on the other side, something ancient and intelligent awaits. Something that doesn't speak your language but communicates directly with your soul. Some call it the bardo, the in-between state described in Tibetan teachings. Others describe it as the Chinvat bridge from Zoroastrian tradition, or the Egyptian hall of two truths, where the heart is weighed against a feather. These aren't just stories. They're metaphors for the initiatory trials that every soul faces after death, the mirrors, the mazes, the revelations. You don't escape your inner world when you die, you step inside it. And within that inner world, layers begin to unfold, layers that were hidden in physical life, but now rise to the surface in vivid clarity. You are no longer protected by the filters of the brain or the body. There is no more sleep, no more distraction, no more numbing. What you carry within becomes your reality. And that reality contains the tests that are not externally imposed, but born from your soul's own longing to awaken. The first test is recognition. Do you realize you've died? This may sound simple, but many souls do not. They cling to the familiar. They try to re-enter their routines. They look for the people and patterns they once knew. If the soul is heavily attached to the material world, the shock of death can cause it to reject the transition entirely. And so the soul remains in a loop, refusing the very door it was meant to walk through. Recognition is not about knowledge, it's about vibration. Only when your frequency begins to loosen from attachment can the soul truly see where it is. The second test is surrender. Can you let go of control? The soul, freshly emerged from the physical plane, often tries to bring its egoic habits with it. It clings to names, titles, identities, beliefs, but none of those things hold weight here. In this realm, what matters is essence. If you try to cling to your role, your persona, your spiritual ego, you may find yourself in a state of confusion. The more you try to control, the more the landscape resists. The soul must learn that navigation here happens through openness, not willpower, through resonance, not intellect. Next comes the test of truth. This is where the soul begins to face its own energy, not metaphorically, but quite literally. Everything you've done, every intention you've carried, every emotion you buried, now it rises like mist from the ground. You may be shown your life in a series of moments. Not through memory, but immersion. You feel what others felt because of your actions. You see the impact of your words not just in form, but in vibration. If you brought joy, it echoes in waves of light. If you caused harm, you feel the constriction it created in the hearts of others, and now, in your own field. This isn't judgment. There is no voice declaring you guilty or innocent. The test is whether you can stay present with what you see, whether you can allow the truth of your own frequency to pass through you without denial. Can you forgive yourself? Can you integrate what you've done without collapsing into shame or defensiveness? Many souls struggle here, not because the light is unkind, but because they were never taught how to hold their own shadows in compassion. This is the fire that purifies, the alchemy that begins when the soul stops hiding. Then comes the test of direction. Where will you go from here? You see, death doesn't automatically place you in heaven or hell. It offers you paths, many of them. Some lead to healing realms, others to realms of learning, still others to reincarnation or service. But you are not forced down any one path. The soul chooses, based on its readiness, its desires, and its vibration. And in this moment, the test is not which path you pick, it's whether the choice is aligned with truth or driven by fear. Many souls choose to return to the physical world, not out of purpose, but because they are afraid to move deeper. Others choose to remain in realms that mirror their wounds, because those wounds are all they've ever known. And finally, there is the test of remembrance. This is the deepest initiation, the moment when the soul is asked to remember who it really is, not who it was in the last life, not who it thought it needed to be, but what it is beyond time, beyond form, beyond the layers of incarnation. This is the unveiling of your divine origin, the moment when the veil thins enough for the soul to touch the eternal. And yet, not every soul is ready to receive that light. Some resist it, not because the light judges, but because the soul still judges itself. The light, in all its purity, asks nothing of you. It waits, but to fully enter it, to merge with it, you must be willing to become transparent, to let go of everything you've used to separate yourself. To dissolve, not into nothingness, but into wholeness. This is the final gate of the initiation, and for many souls, this is where they pause. Some for moments, some for lifetimes. All of this is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to remind you that death is not a cosmic lullaby. It is a sacred rite of passage. And like all rites of passage, it demands presence, courage, and surrender. It is not something to be avoided or ignored. It is something to be prepared for, not by obsessing over the afterlife, but by refining your inner life now. You prepare for death not by fearing it, but by living as if your soul is real, because it is. You prepare by telling the truth, by releasing what no longer serves, by cultivating love, not as sentiment, but as a frequency. You prepare by realizing that every moment, every choice, every breath is shaping not just your future, but your initiation. When the time comes, you will not be thrown into darkness or carried into light against your will. You will walk into a series of experiences that reveal your soul's alignment. You will face mirrors, crossroads, and revelations. You will be tested, not to be judged, but to be awakened. And in that sacred space between lifetimes, between identities, between worlds, you will have the chance to remember who you truly are. That is the real beginning. That is the real work. That is the real initiation. What if I told you that dying without ever truly knowing yourself is one of the most dangerous things a soul can do? We tend to think of self-discovery as a luxury, something you explore when you have time, energy, or the right conditions. It's treated like an accessory to life, not the core of it. But what most people don't realize is that knowing yourself, deeply, truthfully, fully, isn't optional. It's preparation, not just for living well, but for what comes after. Because when you die without having faced your truth, without having healed your wounds, or integrated your shadow, you don't simply float away into light. You enter the next world as a fractured being, a soul that never became whole. And in that state, the afterlife becomes not a place of clarity, but a continuation of confusion. This is the reality of soul fragmentation. It happens gradually, quietly, piece by piece. We give ourselves away. We create false identities to survive. We wear masks to be loved. We silence our truth to avoid conflict. We bury trauma so deep we forget it ever happened. And while the world may applaud our performance, the soul keeps the score. The soul remembers every time you abandoned your essence to be accepted, every time you chose numbness over feeling, every time you split off a part of yourself because it was too much or too painful. These disowned parts don't disappear, they become fragments, energetic shards scattered across your inner world, waiting to be retrieved. And when the body dies, those fragments don't suddenly come back together. If anything, they become more visible. The afterlife doesn't just show you the life you lived, it shows you the parts of yourself you left behind. And for the fragmented soul, that can be overwhelming. Imagine entering a realm that reflects your consciousness, only to find that you aren't a single, unified being, but a fractured mosaic of suppressed emotions, lost memories, and false personas. You don't walk into peace, you walk into chaos, because chaos is what you carried within. Souls that never integrated in life often experience the afterlife as disorienting. They may not recognize themselves. They may feel pulled in multiple directions. One part of them longs for light, another clings to shame. One part wants to ascend, another is still stuck in an identity at war for decades. The self is not unified, it's in pieces. And until those pieces are brought into harmony, the soul cannot move forward. This fragmentation shows up in many ways. Sometimes it looks like memory loss, souls forgetting who they were, where they are, or what they're meant to do. Other times it manifests as looping, reliving the same role or trauma over and over, because a part of the self is still trying to process what happened. In more extreme cases, the soul may feel torn, unable to choose a path, unable to hear guidance, unable to find rest. It's not that the soul is weak, it's that it was never taught how to become whole. The world teaches you how to succeed, how to impress, how to conform, but very rarely does it teach you how to integrate, to sit with the child you once were, to listen to the wounds instead of suppressing them, to stop pretending and actually feel, to remove the mask without shame. These are not just therapeutic exercises, they are spiritual imperatives. Because what you refuse to integrate becomes what haunts you later. This is why many ancient traditions place such importance on rites of passage, deep inner work, and emotional purification. They weren't trying to moralize or control behavior. They were preparing the soul for death. They understood that the more fragmented you are when you die, the harder your transition becomes. Because in the afterlife, there are no distractions. No jobs to hide behind. No routines to numb the pain. There's only you, facing yourself. And the more fragmented that self is, the harder it is to move through the after-death realms. The soul becomes caught in its own dissonance. One part ascends while another pulls downward. One part reaches for healing while another still clings to victimhood. These splits are not punished, they're simply incompatible with higher frequencies. Light requires coherence, it requires wholeness. Not perfection, but integration. The ability to be with all parts of yourself, without resistance. This is why some souls remain in lower vibrational realms for what feels like extended periods. They aren't evil, they're incomplete. They haven't brought their parts home. And so they experience environments that mirror their inner division. Fragments become echoes, echoes become landscapes, landscapes become the soul's reality. They're not stuck because of judgment, they're stuck because they haven't yet remembered how to become one. But here's the truth. Every fragment wants to return. Every piece of the self you've abandoned, through trauma, denial, or shame, is not trying to hurt you. It's trying to be seen, to be loved, to be welcomed back into the heart of who you are. And the moment you turn toward it with compassion, rather than fear, something extraordinary begins to happen. The energy softens, the fragment begins to integrate. The soul begins to glow. This work doesn't have to wait until death. In fact, it's far easier to do it here, while you still have a body, a voice, a mind that can reflect and choose. Integration is the process of calling your spirit home. It means facing the lies you believed about yourself. It means grieving the parts you exiled. It means choosing honesty over image, presence over performance. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it feels like dying while still alive. But that's the point. You are meant to die to the false self before you physically die. That way, when your time comes, the self that crosses the threshold is not a shattered mirror, but a clear, luminous whole. Because in the afterlife, only wholeness can truly rise. Not perfection, not purity in the religious sense, but spiritual coherence. The ability to move through realms without being pulled apart by unresolved inner wars. The ability to meet your soul not as a stranger, but as a friend. So the question is, have you truly met yourself? Or are you still living through the masks, the roles, the protective personas? Have you embraced the part of you that feels unworthy? The part that lashes out? The part that wants to run? Or have you kept those fragments at arm's length, hoping they'd fade? Because they don't fade, they wait, and when you die, they rise to meet you, not to condemn, but to be completed. This is your invitation, not to become someone else, but to reclaim who you've always been, piece by piece, truth by truth, breath by breath. The failure to integrate isn't just a psychological wound, it's a spiritual delay, but it's never final. Every soul, no matter how fragmented, can return to wholeness. But wholeness doesn't happen by accident, it happens by intention, and the time to begin is now. What if I told you that not all prisons have walls? There's a realm beyond this one, not yet the realm of light, not quite the earth you've known. It's a place many pass through, but some never leave. It's not a punishment, it's a mirror, made of feeling, memory, and desire. This is the astral plane, the realm between realms. And while it's meant to be a transition, a corridor between lifetimes or into higher consciousness, it can become a trap for souls who aren't ready to face themselves. The astral is closer to the physical world than most realize. You can think of it as the emotional echo of the material plane, not physical, but tangible in a different way. It's where thoughts move faster than light, where time doesn't operate by hours or days but by intensity of emotion. In the astral, everything you feel becomes visible. Every unhealed attachment, every longing, every fear takes shape, not metaphorically, but in the very landscape around you. This is what makes it dangerous. Because the astral doesn't test you with monsters. It seduces you with familiarity. Many souls, after death, awaken here. And at first, it can feel like a dream. They see what they want to see. They encounter family, comforts, familiar places. But look closer, and you'll notice something strange. The edges blur. The people don't evolve. The environment loops. It may feel comforting, but it's static. Nothing moves forward. This is the trap. The soul, lulled into a false sense of peace, stays in a self-created bubble of memory, not realizing that what surrounds them is not real, it's projection. It's not the soul's true home. It's a reflection of what the soul still clings to. The astral is not evil, it's not demonic, but it is reactive. It responds to the soul's vibration instantly. If a person died with unresolved grief, that grief will color their astral experience. If they died with strong beliefs, religious, political, personal, the astral can conform to those beliefs and make them feel true. A devout person might find themselves in a place that looks like their version of heaven. A fearful person might encounter symbolic punishments they think they deserve. These aren't placed upon them by some external judge. The astral simply becomes what you expect, what you project, what you've most emotionally invested in. This is why clarity matters. If a soul crosses over without inner awareness, they become vulnerable to their own illusions. They mistake symbols for truth. They accept repetition as resolution. They find themselves in comfort zones that feel safe, but are spiritually stagnant. And the longer they stay, the more difficult it becomes to recognize the illusion. Because the astral is sticky. It rewards familiarity. It seduces you with nostalgia, desire, unfinished love. It lets you recreate your old life, but without the clarity to realize you're not truly living. There are countless souls still trapped in astral loops. Some believe they're still alive, others know they've died, but resist moving on. They replay old relationships, they rehearse old traumas, they chase unfulfilled desires, thinking they'll find peace if they can just finish something. But the astral can't offer completion. It can only reflect what already exists within you. If you died with a longing for validation, you might build a world where you're endlessly praised, but never truly fulfilled. If you died clinging to someone you lost, you might see a version of them, but it won't be their soul, just your projection of them, repeating what you wish they'd say. And then there are the lower astral zones, denser regions, charged with fear, anger, addiction, and manipulation. not because they were assigned to anyone, but because certain souls arrive with energy that resonates with those frequencies. A person who lived in hatred may find themselves in a landscape filled with hostility. A person who abused power may awaken in a world where control is constantly threatened. These are not punishments, they are consequences of resonance. The soul has not yet released the vibration it carried, so the astral reflects it back, until awareness breaks the cycle. But awareness in the astral is rare, because the realm is built on reaction, not reflection. Most souls don't stop to question what they're experiencing, they assume it's real. They interact with projections as if they are independent entities. They run from fears that cannot hurt them. They chase pleasures that never satisfy. And they remain, sometimes for what feels like centuries, waiting for something outside of themselves to change. But nothing changes in the astral until the soul changes. Because in this realm, you are the architect of everything you see. Some traditions describe the astral as a testing ground, not because someone is testing you, but because your soul is given the chance to see just how attached it still is. Do you need to control? Do you still crave approval? Are you addicted to identity? Are you trapped in guilt? These energies are not judged, but they are revealed, and they are revealed through environment, through experience, through illusion that feels so real it's almost indistinguishable from truth. And yet, there is always a way out. The key is self-awareness. The moment a soul begins to question its surroundings, the cracks in the illusion appear. The moment a soul stops reacting and begins observing, the light starts to return. Guides may become visible, beings who were always present, but hidden by the soul's own mental fog. The astral doesn't hold you against your will, it holds you by your own frequency. And when that frequency shifts, the realm itself dissolves. This is why preparation in life is so crucial. Learning to observe your thoughts, to detach from your identity, to clear emotional wounds. This isn't just for your peace now, it's training for what comes after. Because if you can learn, here, to see through illusion, you'll be far more capable of navigating the astral without getting stuck in its webs. People think that awakening is only for the living, but awakening is needed even more in the spaces between life and the next. Because the astral can look like anything, paradise or nightmare, heaven or home, a familiar kitchen or a fantastical city. But if you're not grounded in truth, you won't know what's real, and you may waste precious soul time in a loop that feels safe but leads nowhere. There are those who've returned from near-death experiences and spoken of this in hushed tones. Realms that shifted as their thoughts shifted, beings that responded instantly to emotion, entire environments made from memory or regret. They speak of beauty, yes, but also of confusion, of endless landscapes of distraction. And always, there is the sense that something is trying to wake them up, not externally, but from deep within, a voice that whispers, "This isn't it. Keep going." Because the astral is a bridge, not a home. It's meant to be passed through, not pitched in. It's where the soul gathers its strength, sheds its final illusions, and chooses its next evolution. But that choice requires clarity. It requires surrender. It requires the soul to stop looking outward for truth, and start remembering that it carried the truth all along. So when your time comes, and you find yourself in a world shaped by your own consciousness, ask yourself, does this feel alive? Or does it feel like a dream I've mistaken for awakening? Because the astral doesn't trap you, but you can trap yourself inside it, until you're willing to let go of what was never real to begin with. What if I told you that your soul has a weight, not measured in pounds or mass, but in vibration? We often think of the afterlife in terms of reward and punishment, as if some cosmic scale weighs your deeds against a moral code and then assigns you to your fate. But the deeper truth is far more profound and far more personal. It's not morality that decides where your soul goes after death, it's frequency. The universe isn't governed by judgment, it's governed by resonance. And when your body falls away, the only thing that remains is the vibrational signature you've cultivated through the way you lived, thought, felt, and believed. Vibration is the language of the soul. It's the invisible current that pulses beneath every action and every intention. It's not just what you do, but how you do it, why you do it, and what you carry in your heart as you move through life. Two people can commit the same act on the surface, but generate completely different energies beneath it. One may act from love, the other from fear, and it is that underlying vibration, not the visible behavior, that echoes into the realms beyond. In the physical world, you can fake it. You can wear smiles while feeling rage. You can give generously while secretly craving recognition. You can speak softly while carrying deep resentment. But the afterlife has no tolerance for masks. Vibration doesn't lie. When you die, you don't get to explain yourself. You simply arrive at the frequency you created, like a note ringing out into the next world, finding its match in the symphony of the soul realms. If your vibration is light, clear, and open, it rises. If it's dense, tangled, and heavy, it sinks, not because you were bad, but because energy moves where it belongs. This is what determines why some souls ascend easily, while others remain in lower realms. Not because one is better, but because they resonate differently. High-frequency souls naturally gravitate toward realms of peace, beauty, harmony, and truth. These are not static heavens. They are dynamic fields of consciousness where thought manifests instantly and growth continues. But to exist there, your soul must be in tune. It must vibrate at a level of clarity, love, and self-awareness that matches the environment. Otherwise, you won't be able to stay, not because you're banished, but because you won't feel at home. Low-frequency souls aren't punished. They simply gravitate toward what feels familiar. If you've lived in fear, resentment, jealousy, or bitterness, those energies don't just vanish. They form the tone of your consciousness. And when you cross over, you will be magnetized toward realms that match that tone. These may feel uncomfortable, murky, or confusing, but they are also reflective. They show you what needs healing. The purpose is not suffering, it's realization. These lower zones are not final, they're transitional. They hold you until you're ready to raise your frequency. So, how do you change your frequency in life, and prepare your soul to rise after death? Spiritual practices aren't about earning points with the universe, they are tools for tuning your instrument. Meditation, prayer, self-reflection, forgiveness, gratitude, these are not moral obligations, they are vibrational technologies. They train the mind to become still, the heart to become open, the ego to become transparent. They clear the static of fear and allow the signal of the soul to come through more purely. The more consistently you practice, the more your frequency begins to shift, not instantly, but deeply. One of the most powerful ways to elevate your vibration is presence. Being fully here, now, in this breath, in this moment. Presence dissolves illusion. It quiets the stories that lower your frequency, stories of lack, of unworthiness, of control. When you are present, you're aligned with the timeless part of yourself. And alignment is the seed of ascension, because when you're aligned, you're no longer split between who you are and who you're pretending to be. And when you're whole, your vibration naturally rises. Another key is emotional honesty. You cannot ascend while dragging shame, guilt, or anger behind you. Not because these emotions are wrong, but because suppression makes them heavy. When you deny what you feel, you create blockages. Energy gets stuck, and stuck energy is dense energy. But when you allow yourself to feel fully, and then release, you liberate your field. Every emotion you transmute becomes fuel for your ascension. It's not about being happy all the time. It's about being real, feeling it all, and letting it move through you without becoming your identity. Relationships also play a critical role. Your interactions with others are constant mirrors of your vibration. If you project blame, if you gossip, if you manipulate or control, you're entangling your field in the lower frequencies of separation. But if you listen, if you speak truth with compassion, if you forgive, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace, these choices lift your soul. Every act of love, every moment of humility, every effort to understand rather than judge, increases your resonance. But none of this happens automatically. Vibration doesn't rise just because you know these things intellectually. It rises because you live them, because you embody them, because you stop chasing validation and start returning to your essence. The essence that was always enough, always radiant, always connected to Source. And when you die, it is this essence that determines your path, not the rituals you performed, not the beliefs you held, but the frequency you became. It's not about religion, it's about resonance. You could believe in nothing and still rise, if your life was aligned with truth, kindness, and presence. You could be deeply spiritual in name, but remain stuck, if your energy was rooted in pride, judgment, or fear. Some souls, upon dying, rise like feathers on a breeze, effortless, graceful, joyful, not because they were perfect, but because they were light. Others struggle, not because they are cursed, but because they are dense, heavy with unresolved emotion, tangled in identity, burdened by attachments. And again, this isn't final. Even after death, the soul is given opportunity after opportunity to rise. But the work becomes more difficult without the clarity of the body. Without time, without form, without the grounding that incarnation offers, healing becomes slower, more abstract. This is why it is such a gift to do the work now, here, while you're alive. Every meditation is a tuning, every truth spoken is a clearing, every act of compassion is a spark of light in your field, and all of it adds up. The soul doesn't forget, it accumulates frequency. It weaves every lesson into the tapestry of your being, and that tapestry is what you'll wear into the next world, not as a robe, but as vibration. And that vibration will call to it the reality you step into. So if you wonder where you're going after death, ask yourself, what are you resonating with now? What emotions do you feed? What stories do you believe? What energies do you invite into your space, your relationships, your thoughts? Because this life is the workshop, the classroom, the sacred stage on which you shape your frequency. And that frequency is your destiny. What if I told you that the light everyone talks about after death isn't guaranteed? You've heard the stories, the glowing tunnel, the warm embrace, the overwhelming sense of peace. So many near-death experiencers return with tales of this radiant light that greets them the moment they cross over. It's become a spiritual cliché. The idea that no matter how you lived, no matter how unprepared you were, the light will simply appear, welcoming you home. But what if that isn't always true? What if the light doesn't come for everyone, not out of punishment, but because not every soul is ready to receive it? There is a hard truth that much of the modern spiritual community tends to avoid. The light is real, yes, but your access to it depends entirely on who you've become, not in image, but in essence. It is not a handout. It is not automatic. The light is a frequency. It's not a place you're escorted to. It's a vibration you must resonate with to even perceive it. You don't find the light, you match it. And if your soul is filled with fear, deception, bitterness, or deep attachment to ego, the light may be present, but you won't see it. You'll be blind to it. Not because it isn't there, but because your inner state is not yet aligned with its clarity. You might imagine that would be obvious once you've crossed over, that you'd be able to look around, realize you're dead, and naturally move toward the highest reality available. But it's not that simple. Consciousness doesn't automatically expand just because you've left the body. If anything, your energetic state becomes more exposed, more immediate, more intensified. And if you were consumed by resentment in life, that won't dissolve the moment your heart stops beating. That energy follows you. That perception becomes your experience, and you may find yourself in a space of fog, not light. There are realms, layers of the non-physical, that are thick with this fog. Not dark in the way we think of evil, not full of flames or torment, but muted, dim, confused. These are not punishments, they are zones of vibration that mirror the soul's current state, and for some, these spaces can feel like nothingness, no tunnel, no voice, no guidance. Just a vast silence, where the soul's own confusion echoes back again and again. The light hasn't abandoned them, they have simply not tuned their essence to perceive it. It's a devastating realization for some. Souls who were certain that the light would be waiting, souls who perhaps believed in it their whole lives, but who spent those lives avoiding inner work, masking their pain, clinging to judgment, or manipulating others. They assumed belief would be enough, but belief is not the same as embodiment. You can believe in the sun, but if you never open the blinds, you'll sit in darkness your entire life. And yet, this isn't a condemnation, it's a call to awaken. Because the light doesn't discriminate, it doesn't withhold itself like a scorned lover. It's always present, always pulsing, always calling, but it respects the law of resonance. It honors the integrity of spiritual law. If you are full of noise, it waits for your silence. If you are tangled in ego, it waits for your surrender. If you are hiding, it waits for your emergence. The light is not a destination, it is a state of being. This is why some near-death experiences are full of awe, and others are full of terror. The experience is not standardized. It's tailored to the soul's vibration at the moment of death. Some pass with a heart full of love, peace, and authenticity, and they are immediately enveloped in the light. Others cross over with heavy regret, fear, or unprocessed trauma, and they enter into layers of shadow, confusion, or emotional echo chambers. They're not being judged, they're being reflected. And for some, the light appears briefly, but they turn away. They don't feel worthy, or they're too attached to their former life, or they simply don't understand what they're seeing. They back away from the very presence that could free them, not out of defiance, but because their inner world is still wrapped in resistance. The light never forces, it never drags, it waits. So, what determines whether you will perceive the light? It's not about religion, it's not about knowledge, it's about your energetic truth, your alignment, the congruence between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. The light is attracted to coherence, to sincerity, to the soul that has begun, even imperfectly, to remember itself. You don't have to be flawless, you just have to be real. Kindness raises your frequency, integrity aligns your energy, presence dissolves the fog. These simple acts, often dismissed in life as soft or unimportant, are the very qualities that make the light visible when your body falls away. It's not about perfection, it's about preparation, and that preparation is internal. Some people spend their entire lives trying to build a spiritual resume, hours of meditation, pages of teachings, communities of followers. But if all of that is built on ego, control, or hidden pain, the light may still feel distant. Meanwhile, a person who lived simply, loved deeply, and forgave easily, even without any formal spiritual training, may find themselves immersed in the light without hesitation. Because love is the key, humility is the key, truth is the key. There are also souls who die suddenly, tragically, in shock or trauma. For them, the light may appear, but their consciousness may not be clear enough to embrace it. They may linger, disoriented, still identifying with the life they just left. For these souls, the light comes in waves. It offers itself again and again, often through helpers, guides, or familiar symbols. But again, they must choose to let go in order to rise, not because they are guilty, but because the light cannot be entered through resistance. And this is perhaps the most sacred truth of all. The light is a choice. Not a choice in the way we pick from a menu, but a deeper, soul-level choice to align with its frequency, to dissolve the lies, to face the fear, to surrender the need to be right, or in control, or admired. The light cannot be earned, it can only be met, and the meeting happens within you. So, if you've ever wondered what awaits you on the other side, ask yourself this: what are you aligning with now? What are you practicing in your thoughts, your feelings, your relationships, your habits? Are you cultivating light, or are you just hoping it will find you? Because the light is not just a future experience, it's here, it's always here, waiting for you to match it, to see it, to become it. And when your time comes, you won't find the light. You'll either recognize it, or you won't, but you can begin recognizing it now, in forgiveness, in silence, in presence, in every moment you choose to come home to yourself. That's where the light lives, not in a tunnel, not in the clouds, but in the truth of your vibration. And when your soul sings in harmony with that truth, the light doesn't just appear, it opens. What if I told you that the moment your life flashes before your eyes, it might not be what you expect? There's a common belief, wrapped in comfort and wrapped in hope, that when you die, you'll be met with peace. A life review that gently shows you what you lived, what you learned, what you meant to others. And yes, for some, that's exactly what it is. A loving, illuminating, soul-expanding moment. But for others, that review is anything but soft. It's not cruel, it's not punishment, but it is raw. It is honest, it is unfiltered, and it doesn't just show you what you did, it makes you feel it. From every angle. The life review is not a highlight reel. It's not a memory montage scored by angelic music. It is full spectrum consciousness, a reliving of your choices, your energy, your intentions, through the eyes of those you touched. You don't just see your life, you experience it. Not as the actor, but as the receiver. Every word you spoke in anger, you'll feel as if you were the one it was spoken to. Every moment of kindness you offered, you'll feel as if you were the one being uplifted. It is total empathy, total reflection. The soul is not being judged by an external force. It is witnessing itself in full, unobstructed awareness. For many, this is a profound awakening, but for others, it is piercing. The review can expose what you avoided, ignored, or justified. It brings to light the energies behind your actions, not just what you did, but why you did it. The lies you told to keep the peace, the love you withheld to protect your pride. The times you looked away when you could have helped, none of it disappears. It all returns, not as condemnation, but as understanding. You are shown not just what you gave, but what it created in others. You feel the ripple effect of your choices, every one of them, radiating out in all directions. This isn't about morality, it's about resonance. If you lived unconsciously, if you moved through life, focused only on your own needs, if you used people, manipulated them, disrespected them, you'll feel it. You'll feel their confusion, their pain, their loneliness. You'll feel the moment they doubted themselves because of something you said. You'll see how your unhealed wounds bled into others. And you'll also feel how that pain moved through them and touched the next person, and the next, creating echoes that didn't end when you walked away. None of this is punishment. It is awareness. It is truth returned in full. And truth, for a soul unprepared, can be devastating. Not because it's meant to be, but because it's been denied for so long. Some souls resist the review. They turn away, try to numb, try to flee. But there is nowhere to run. There is no distraction, no scrolling, no numbing habits to hide behind. In the afterlife, you are naked in consciousness. And the only way out is through. The only way to rise is to receive all of yourself, even the parts that sting. But there's another side to this, because the review doesn't only show your failures, it reveals your light. The moments you didn't even realize made a difference. When you smiled at a stranger who was about to give up. When you said something kind without thinking twice. When you forgave someone without needing an apology. These moments return too, and they shine. You feel the warmth you gave, the courage you sparked, the healing you unknowingly initiated in another's heart, and that, too, radiates outward. The good you've done is never lost. The light you shared continues long after the moment ends, and in the life review, you get to see that glow. But the glow is earned through truth, through integration, through facing the shadows. If you want a beautiful life review, you have to live a life worth reviewing. Not a perfect one, but a conscious one. A life where you're willing to see yourself clearly before death forces the issue. Because the more aware you become now, the less shocking the review becomes later. The more you take responsibility now, the less weight you'll carry into that sacred unveiling. There are souls who weep through their review, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. They see how much they missed, how many chances they had to love more openly, to speak more kindly, to live more courageously. They aren't punished, they grieve their own blindness. They feel the opportunities lost, not because they're being scolded, but because they see what could have been. The life review is a mirror with no distortion, and in that clarity, the soul awakens to its own potential, and its own neglect of that potential. But even in the most brutal reviews, there is love. The field that holds you as you witness yourself is never condemning. It is vast, intelligent, compassionate. It knows why you did what you did. It understands the pain that shaped you, the programming you inherited, the trauma you never learned how to heal. Nothing is dismissed, but nothing is excused either. You are seen, entirely. And in that seeing, you are invited, not forced, but invited, to forgive yourself, to make amends, not through words, but through understanding, to choose, in that moment, to begin evolving. And this is the true purpose of the life review, not to shame you, but to expand you, to show you who you've been, so that you can choose who you will become. Because the soul doesn't end with death. Growth doesn't stop when the body falls away. You carry on. You continue. And the insights you gain in the review become the seeds of your next evolution. But only if you're willing to receive them. The most evolved souls don't dread the review. They welcome it. They live in such a way that they're constantly reviewing themselves, moment to moment, breath to breath. They ask, did I speak from truth? Did I love well? Did I leave the world lighter than I found it? They don't wait for the afterlife to reflect. They reflect now. And in doing so, they prepare their soul for clarity, not confusion, for peace, not pain. So ask yourself, if your life review began today, what would you feel? What moments would return, asking for acknowledgement? What wounds would you relive, but this time from the other side? What beauty would you rediscover, not from pride, but from awe? You still have time to realign, time to heal, time to offer the kind of presence that will one day greet you in the mirror of eternity. Because that mirror is coming, not with wrath, but with precision. It will show you everything, not to crush you, but to call you home. The life review is not always beautiful, but it can be, and you get to decide that, now. What if I told you that the most important preparation for death has nothing to do with dying? We've been taught to fear death like a thief, something that comes to take what we love, something we avoid, postpone, deny. But in truth, death doesn't steal, it reveals. It lifts the veil between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. It exposes the essence beneath the performance. And when that moment comes, the only thing you'll carry with you is what you cultivated inside. The thoughts you chose to dwell in, the emotions you allowed to root, the intentions behind your actions. Nothing else matters, not your bank account, not your resume, not your social mask. Only vibration remains. And the time to prepare for that moment isn't later, it's now. The question isn't, what happens after I die? The question is, what am I becoming while I live? Because what you become is what meets you on the other side. And that becoming doesn't need to be grand. It doesn't require years in a monastery or mystical visions. It begins with the simple act of presence. When you are present, truly present, you begin to live with clarity. You become aware of the stories that dominate your thoughts, the subtle energies behind your choices. You begin to feel when you're closing your heart, when you're defending your ego, when you're avoiding the truth of your own emotions, and in that awareness, you begin to shift. Presence is the gateway to preparation. It teaches you how to meet life as it is, not as you wish it were. And in meeting life honestly, you begin to clean the mirror of your soul. The clearer it becomes, the more light it can reflect, and the more light you hold within, the more naturally you'll move into the next realm when the time comes. It won't feel foreign, it won't feel jarring, it will feel like a natural continuation, because you've already made space for it. But presence alone isn't enough. What you carry emotionally must also be addressed. Resentments, regrets, fears, and shame. These are not just psychological burdens, they are energetic weights. They don't disappear when you die, they accompany you, shaping the frequency of your soul. This is why forgiveness is not optional, it is a spiritual necessity. Not forgiveness for others' sake, but for your own liberation. When you hold on to anger or betrayal, you're anchoring yourself in a density that will tether your soul after death. It's not about excusing what was done to you, it's about choosing to be free of it. The same goes for guilt. If there are apologies left unsaid, truths left buried, wounds you've inflicted that still ache in someone else's heart, tend to them. Not from obligation, but from integrity. Because if you don't make peace now, your soul will have to face it later. You will feel what they felt. You will experience what you caused. This isn't punishment, it's spiritual law. And you still have time to bring healing while you're here. A sincere apology, a moment of vulnerability, a single act of reconciliation can dissolve years of karmic weight. And then there's kindness, often overlooked, underestimated. But kindness is one of the most powerful vibrational practices you can engage in. Every kind act sends ripples through consciousness. Every time you choose gentleness over judgment, patience over irritation, empathy over indifference, you are tuning your frequency to the higher realms. You are preparing your soul to walk in light. Not by force, but by choice. by becoming the kind of being that naturally ascends because it no longer clings to density. And don't underestimate the power of simplicity. You don't need a complicated spiritual practice to be spiritually prepared. You need honesty. You need consistency. Wake up and ask yourself, what am I carrying today that I no longer need? What thought can I release? What truth can I face? What love can I express that I've been holding back? These aren't grand revelations. They're quiet moments of realignment, and they matter more than you think. Another key is letting go of identity, not entirely, but gently. So many people die still clinging to the idea of who they were, their name, their job, their personality, their roles. But identity is a garment, not your essence, and when death arrives, that garment is taken off. If you've invested all your meaning in that garment, you will feel lost, disoriented. You may even refuse to move on, because you don't know who you are without it. That's why it's essential, while still alive, to begin loosening your grip. Begin realizing that you are not your story. You are not your trauma. You are not your success. You are the awareness beneath it all. Spend time in silence, not to escape the world, but to hear yourself beneath the noise. In that silence, your soul speaks. And what it says may surprise you. It doesn't need you to be impressive. It doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be real, to be willing to feel what you've been avoiding, to let the illusions fall away. That's what prepares you. Not rituals, not dogma, but inner honesty. You can also prepare by shifting your relationship to death itself. Don't treat it as an enemy. Don't push it into the shadows of your awareness. Learn to make peace with its presence, not morbidly, but humbly. Every breath is a reminder that life is sacred, because it ends. Every goodbye is a rehearsal for the final one. But rather than living in fear, use this knowledge to live with intention. Ask yourself, if this were my last day, would I be at peace? If not, why? What remains unsaid, unlived, unloved? Preparation is not about fear, it's about freedom. It's about being able to let go when the time comes. Not with regret, but with grace. It's about cultivating a soul so clear, so aligned, so tuned to truth, that when you cross over, you don't resist, you rise. And that rising begins here. In the way you treat the people around you, in the way you speak to yourself when no one's listening, in the way you honor your own growth, even when it's uncomfortable. Every choice matters. Every moment matters. Not because you're being judged, but because you're becoming. Death doesn't interrupt that becoming, it reveals where you are in the journey. So begin now, prepare now, not by hoarding knowledge or chasing mystical experiences, but by softening, by telling the truth, by living with your heart open, even when it hurts. That is the work. That is the path. And it's available to you in this moment, right here, right now. Because the afterlife is not some far-off destination. It begins the moment you start living like a soul. And the more you live that way, the more natural the transition becomes. You won't have to seek the light. You'll already be walking in it. What if I told you that death is not the beginning of the unknown, but the final confrontation with everything you chose not to remember? There is a door that every soul will walk through. It does not matter your title, your wealth, your fame, or your failures. That door does not open with credentials. It opens with truth. And when it does, you don't become someone else. You become more of who you already are. Magnified, exposed, seen in full. This is why awakening before the final door matters more than anything else you will ever do. Because the great secret is this: not everyone survives the afterlife. Not because they are judged, but because they never truly lived, they never remembered. You may have spent your whole life achieving, performing, surviving. You may have mastered the rules of this world, learned how to please, how to impress, how to protect yourself. But the soul doesn't care about survival tactics. It cares about essence. And death doesn't reward your mask, it dissolves it. In that moment, everything you pretended to be falls away. And if you've never connected to who you really are underneath the noise, that moment won't feel like peace. It will feel like loss. Not because something was taken from you, but because you never reclaimed what was already yours. To awaken now is to stop waiting. To stop pretending that enlightenment is something reserved for monks or mystics or the last few breaths on a hospital bed. To awaken now is to interrupt your autopilot and ask the one question that can change everything. Who am I, really, when the world's not watching? If your answer is uncomfortable, you're on the right track. Awakening doesn't always feel blissful. Sometimes it feels like grief. The grief of realizing how long you've been asleep. The grief of seeing how often you betrayed your own light just to be accepted, approved of, or safe. But that grief is sacred. It cracks open the shell, and in that crack, the real light enters, not the performative kind, not the curated spiritual image, but the quiet, steady, knowing that you are something far more ancient, far more vast, than any name you've ever answered to. You are not your pain, though it taught you. You are not your past, though it shaped you. You are not your personality, though it helped you navigate this strange world. You are awareness itself. You are the still point behind every experience. And the more you remember that, the less afraid you become of death, because you realize you've already touched eternity, not after life, but here, in presence, in stillness, in truth. This is why death terrifies those who have spent their lives running, not from danger, but from themselves. You can't outrun your essence. You can distract yourself with achievement, relationships, addictions, ideas, but eventually, the silence catches up to you. And on the other side of that final door, there is only silence. Not cold, not empty, but honest. And if you've never practiced sitting in that silence, you may mistake it for darkness. But it's not. It's the space where you meet yourself without filter. And that meeting can either be a homecoming or a reckoning. So how do you awaken before that meeting comes? Start by getting quiet. Not to escape the world, but to listen to what's deeper than it. Beneath the opinions, the fears, the strategies, there is a still voice that has been whispering your name, not the name your parents gave you, but the name only your soul knows, the one that cannot be spoken, only felt. That voice is your truest guide, and it does not speak in judgment, it speaks in knowing. When you follow it, your life begins to align, not with what's expected, but with what's real. And when you live in alignment with what's real, death has no power over you, because you've already made peace with who you are. And then comes the second step, radical responsibility. To awaken is to stop waiting for someone to save you, to stop blaming your past, your parents, your circumstances. Not because those things didn't hurt you, they did, but because awakening means you are no longer willing to be defined by your wounding. You are no longer content to live small just because someone once told you that you were. You are willing to reclaim every fragment of yourself and walk forward, whole. This is not easy. It takes courage. But it is the only way to ensure that when the final door opens, you walk through it consciously, not confused, not clinging, not stuck in loops of regret. Next is humility. Awakening isn't about thinking you've arrived, it's about knowing you're always arriving. The most awakened souls are not loud, they are luminous. They do not need to convince you of their light, they are the light. And that light comes from surrender, from bowing before something greater than the mind. Call it source, call it God, call it truth. But know this, when you stop trying to control the journey and start honoring the mystery, you begin to flow in rhythm with the greater intelligence behind it all. And that rhythm is what carries you beyond death, not with resistance, but with grace. Also, learn to love, not romantically, but spiritually. Learn to love what's hard to love. Learn to bless the parts of yourself you once rejected. Learn to look at others and see not their flaws, but their forgetfulness. Because all pain, all violence, all cruelty comes from forgetting. When you see with the eyes of the soul, you no longer need to judge. You simply remember for others what they've forgotten. And in doing so, you anchor a light that helps them find their way back. That's the real work. That's what echoes after death. Not your opinions, not your victories, but the love you gave, and the love you became. Finally, practice letting go, not because you have to give things up, but because you were never meant to carry so much. Let go of who you thought you had to be, let go of needing to be understood. Let go of timelines, outcomes, and proving your worth. When you release what isn't yours to hold, you become lighter. And when death comes, that lightness is what allows you to rise, not into heaven, but into truth. And that truth is your home. Awakening before the final door isn't about escaping death, it's about transforming life. It's about realizing that this moment, right here, is sacred, that your breath is holy, that your awareness is eternal, and that every choice you make ripples into infinity. So the invitation is simple, but profound. Wake up now, not just mentally, wake up in your heart, in your body, in your soul, because no one can do this for you, not a teacher, not a guru, not even God. You must choose to remember, you must walk yourself home. The final door will open, whether you're ready or not, but you still have time to soften, time to align, time to become the kind of soul that doesn't just survive the afterlife, but transcends it. Because when the illusions fall away, and the masks dissolve, and the echoes of the world fade, you won't be asked what you did. You'll be asked one thing: did you remember who you are? And the answer will be written not in words, but in your frequency. So, awaken now, before the final door. While there's still time to live like someone who already knows the truth, not everyone survives the afterlife. But everyone can prepare.